The deep dive tonight. For months, 7 News has been reporting on investigations and legal battles between school districts in Northern Virginia and the federal government. It's all over school bathroom and locker room policies that allow students to use those facilities based on their chosen gender identity rather than biological sex.
And now, as our Maryland Bureau Chief Brad Bell reports, the Department of Education is targeting 3 Maryland school districts and the State Department of Education. This is over claims their policies allow boys to play girls' sports and have access to girls' private spaces. Brad, what have you learned?
Yeah, well, they're saying if that is the case and they're just starting this investigation, then that would be a violation of what is known as Title IX, which guarantees that there will be no discrimination based on gender. But this also has to do with exactly what you were talking about in Virginia, and that is whether or not the school systems refer to actual biological gender or gender identity. And the claim is that Maryland and these school districts are using gender identity. Tuesday, the U.S. Department of Education announced it is investigating the Maryland Department of Education, as well as Montgomery, Prince George's, and Frederick County schools over allegations that state and local policy allows boys to compete in girls' sports and have access to girls' locker rooms and bathrooms in violation of Title IX of the Education Code, which prohibits discrimination based on gender. Well, in a statement, an assistant secretary for civil rights argues the practice based solely on self-asserted gender identity is deeply troubling and raises significant legal concerns. The Maryland Department of Education responded saying it is committed to all students and upholding the law, but provided no comment on the investigation. The local school districts released nearly identical statements. We asked Governor Wes Moore for his reaction.
I'm going to look into it and see exactly what the basis of this investigation is. I'm thankful for the fact that we have made historic improvements when it comes to public education inside of the state of Maryland. But of course, we will look into what exactly the Department of Education says, and we'll be able to get back to you on it.
7 News has learned the investigation was launched after a complaint was filed by a DC-based group called the Defense of Freedom Institute. Angela Morabito is DFI's spokesperson.
There's no teenage girl who should have to change clothes in a locker room while a boy looks on just because he raised his hand and said I feel female today.
Morabito says she can't cite examples of boys playing girls' sports or boys in girls' changing areas in Maryland. She says her group has represented the parents of a Carroll County middle school boy who claimed a biological girl was allowed to use the boys' locker room for gym class. But she argues the existence of policy is enough to constitute a Title IX violation.
There are still these districts who try to get away with this woke gender ideology in schools, even though they know it's against the law.
Yeah, and so she says her hope here is that Maryland will come into compliance with how they interpret the law, and that to her and her organization means abandoning the use of the term gender identity and strictly going back to whether or not these are a boy or is it a girl. Scott?
Brad, what kind of impact could all of this have on Maryland? In other words, what if these violations are actually affirmed after they've investigated?
Yeah, so I can tell you that the school districts and across the government in Maryland, they didn't know this was coming, and they're still going through this. And what we're told is that, they're going to really take very seriously this investigation. And potentially, what we're told is if violations exist and Maryland doesn't come into compliance with the law, then it could lead to a loss of federal funding for the school system. In Bowie, Brad Bell, 7 News.